Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. And now, celebrating 15 years of broadcasting, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, whether you're tuning in on the radio dial in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM or WYADonline.com. We're glad you all could be with us. Also, those joining us through our online affiliates around the world, including Conversations Radio Network, where you all could join us as well. I am really excited to welcome author David C. Maloney to our program today. He's written a book called When the Owl Sings. We'll talk to David not only about the writing of the book, but also what it's been like for him to do what he loves as a storyteller, and the way that people have responded to his book that has a lot of different layers. I'll tease some of those here in this conversation, and of course we'll let you guys know how you can get your own copy of the book. And if you're just not hearing about David, I'll let you guys know at the end of our segment how you can stay connected with him too. But David, hello to you and welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me.
The pleasure's definitely all mine. So, David, let's start off at the beginning here. I mean, what has it been like for you to see the way that people have responded to Mason Rhymes and the story within the When the Owl Sings?
It's been pretty rewarding. When you write a book, you kind of set yourself out there, and
right.
I mean, think of like a music artist that writes a song, does the work, practices it thousands and thousands of times, and then people hear it on the radio, and in 10 seconds they like it or don't like it. And I think a book is real similar to that. You put a lot of time. I mean, it took me 7 years to write it. And you really put yourself out there, but I've been pleased. I think the feedback's been pretty good. It's been a real rewarding journey for me.
Right. Well, I went into this book, and I should let our audience know, you and I connected through social media, and we'll talk about how social media has helped you. But I think it's so interesting. After you and I communicated through Facebook, I headed over to Amazon to buy the book for myself because I knew I was going to be having this conversation with you. So I wanted to know what I was talking about, during the conversation with you. And, of course, to be able to tell with our audience. I think there are so many layers to this story that I think really will draw people in no matter where they are. I think, for one, on the surface, David, to talk around it so we don't spoil it, you have an individual there who realizes there's something about his life that's different, something that could be seen as being special, but also, of course, a responsibility that comes with that. I mean, there's even a great quote that you use in the book that we've all have heard about, with, great skills, come responsibilities. With gifts come responsibilities. How did Mason come to you? How did you come to create this character?
Wow. So when I started thinking about the ideas, it was right before the 2012, when the world was going to come to an end because the Mayan calendar was coming to an end, and everyone was kind of freaking out a little bit. And I was thinking about a lot of Mayan mythology, and I started researching it. So this is really Mayan mythology colliding with the 21st century. And in the Mayan mythology, I came across owl mythology, and I've always loved owls. I mean, they're always kind of a mystique kind of creature. I mean, everyone thinks of the wise old owl, but really in cultures all around the world, the owl actually symbolizes death. So there's a real mystique around them, and I just kind of tried to interweave the owl mythology through this Mayan mythology colliding with the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, I think what is so interesting about this, even for those who, just go into this book without any preconceived thoughts at all, David, as I did, I think one of the things they will pick up on, of course, is how life can have such interesting complications and implications. I mentioned the character Mason, but also as interesting is the character Claire. And again, I'll talk around this so I don't spoil it for people. One thing we realize about Claire, even in her interactions with Mason, is that she has had her own background, right? She's had her own issues. What was that like for you to kind of create her layers, even though they were different than Mason's, but to create her own backstory that kind of decided how she dealt with people, including with Mason?
It was really interesting to kind of write that because you have literary license to kind of go with the flow on some of it, and I just started making her more and more complicated. But I wanted to make them. I wanted to give them good chemistry, and there's probably a little of her attitude in me personally, because she's kind of a strong-willed person. She's in areas that in my life I always found areas that were interesting, so I researched some of those and kind of put her in it. But you're right, the book has a lot of one thing leads to another, which leads to another, almost like butterfly effect. The flapping of the butterfly wings somewhere causes a hurricane somewhere else. So a lot of things are linked together. There's a lot of internal arcs in the book.
Right. And I think it all kind of goes back to this life that Mason is living. So I have to ask you a question, David, based on something that happens to Mason in the book. One of the things that Mason tries to do is to understand what in the world is happening, what is happening with me. And so he goes to where a lot of people would, his parents. He goes back to the beginning. When did you realize that storytelling was something that you wanted to do, or that was something that you were meant to do?
I like, it's funny because if you read my bio on the book, I've done a lot of education, and I've always liked writing. I've always just been a creative. I think that's where my creativity goes. I have a brother that's an art director, and he's really artsy, and mine was always writing. I've always liked being a wordsmith, kind of telling a story and this one just kind of evolved. It's funny because people ask me a lot, are you and your dad like that? Because, there's some tension between those two. And I'm like, no, that's fiction. You and my dad aren't fighting like that. But I just feel like it really talks about the human condition a little bit. Somebody with that kind of an ability would struggle. And where does it come from, and who blames who? Because human nature, everyone likes to start blaming everybody. And he has to, and the hero's journey, he has to kind of come to terms with that at some point, which is where I try to go with that literary device.
Mm-hmm. And I think to that end, then, David, you have the idea of the complexities of what is my role in this, right? I mean, Mason goes through that whole thinking even before the conversation with his dad that I alluded to there that you were talking about. I actually want to read that because I think it's interesting the way you worded it about him. For those who have the print edition of the book, you'll find this conversation with Mason's self on pages 170 to 171. And again, just to read a bit of it, David, and then we'll discuss it. You write this. I'm talking about an exchange that Mason just had with a character that we meet named Roy. This is what you say: when Roy's truck gone and the tow truck pulling out, Mason found himself alone. There was a peaceful but numbing silence. Torn between going back into town and helping Richard's family and hitting the road, he reflected on the long-term effects of the accident. The lives of the boys who were acting like irresponsible kids would be changed forever. The newly widowed mother, her children, and their extended family's lives would be changed forever. And the peaceful trip back to Chicago had just taken a serious turn for Mason. And then, there was this idea that comes to Mason when he says to himself, who's next? Were there others I just didn't notice? What if my not dealing with it is actually causing it? Am I causing these people to die? Now, of course, most of us hopefully don't have to ask that question, are my actions or inactions causing these things to happen? But I do think there's a bigger conversation there that I want to talk to you about, David, and that is that how all of us have an opportunity, right, to be able to do something in our life. But the choice is, will we do it? What was that question like for you to ponder for yourself?
I think that I tend to look at action and inaction. As a Catholic, we look at the penitential rite that says we sin in what we do and what we fail to do. So I always look at we have to be proactive. So I took Mason saying, what else? What do I need to do? I mean, if he's harming people, I think somebody who's seriously considering abandoning his gift, I think he needs to take a serious look at that. And for him, And to move the story forward, he ends up, he has to explore that, because what if he is responsible for other people because he's failing to deal with it? I just think personally, I tend to be real proactive, and I think that's an aspect of me probably that I imparted onto Mason, that I think we do good or bad in what we fail to do. So I just try to. Maybe it's an altruistic attitude, but I think I think we need to do self-reflection like that.
Yeah. And I think it goes to another conversation to go back to Claire, David, where the two of them are basically, she says to him, do you think, basically, or you think we're going to be able to fix this, to solve this, to figure this out? And she then says, I hope so, because I hate to lose you. I think there are implications sometimes that for all of us, of course, she not knowing that he feels the same way, right? I mean, that, okay,
right.
Hey, I know something about you that you don't know, is kind of what goes through his mind at times. That knowing, I mean, that is something, too, that I think is interesting about When the Owl Sings, because, even as you talked about the owl itself, David, earlier, I think, we all kind of look around us and we think, wow, we don't know what's going to happen today. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Do you hope that when people kind of live this world with Mason, they realize the importance of making the most of the day?
Yes. I mean, I think we are in such a busy society, coming and going, 24-hour everything. As cliche as it sounds, we really need to stop and smell the roses sometimes. We
right.
have to force ourselves to slow down. I've run crime scenes for 20 years, coming and going, and you see a lot, and you get so wrapped up in life, and it's some of it is just by nature. You have kids, you're just busy. And when hopefully people stop, and there's one line I say in there where as soon as you kind of realize life does end, it kind of makes you look at things, that you see colors differently. You look at a cloud differently than you did, when you're too busy to look at it.
Yeah. I think, too, that, there's the other thing of trust, right? I mean, that is an interesting exchange. I mentioned earlier, and again, we'll talk around that, where with Claire, there is a backstory there. And, of course, that affects, as I mentioned earlier, the way that she interacts. But also the idea that conversation with Mason, where she talks about trust, right? And Mason wants to make sure that
right.
she's someone can be trusted. And I think, that is something that all of us kind of go through. Our experiences in life, right, kind of dictate how far we go when it comes to trusting. I think, as people are reading this book, as I mentioned, again, that's what makes it so fun. The other thing is history. I mean, it's very obvious in reading this that you are a person who enjoys history. You enjoys backstories. Where do you think that comes from, David?
I think that comes from me, honestly, just being a lifelong learner. Like I said, my biography, I've graduated, 5 times from college with 3 undergraduate degrees and 2 graduate, and I like learning. I just have an interest in, after you kind of get your first 1 or 2 degrees out of the way, now you do it for fun. Because I'm not doing it to find a job. I'm just doing it to stay interested. And I think you have to. I think you gotta be a lifelong learner.
Right.
Now that being said, my background's always been in science and crime scene. So it was kind of a big jump to learn kind of a whole new career and jump into the writing world, the literary world, and that was really interesting. Just constantly learning how to do interior monologue, how to do internal arcs, how to lay a foundation and frame things, and it was really interesting for me.
Yeah, I think again, to go to dialogue. Dialogue is definitely something that's a part of the gift that you've given readers in this book, David. Not only, of course, between the characters, mainly Mason and Claire, that I keep coming back to, but also even in letting us know what's going on through their minds. There's that great conversation that I thought was so interesting and also foreshadowing something else, and that is when basically we see Mason finding some confidence in dealing with one of the individuals that he has to confront, and considering him to be quote unquote small time. And Claire having to remind him that don't get too confident, because just because he seems that way doesn't mean that he is. I think there's a bigger message in that for sure. Would you agree, David, in the book, that things are not always as they appear, and people aren't always as they appear?
Wow, yeah, definitely a big yes to both of those. In fact, I think true to life, it kind of does show that everyone's got, I don't want to say demons, but issues. Everyone's got struggles maybe that they go through, that, you're not alone. Everybody has them at some point, and you don't know when you meet somebody, have they already had them? Do they have closure on them? Are they coming up? You don't know where people are all the time, which can really leave kind of a mystique to what people are all about. And that's kind of where, with almost everyone in the book, there's kind of a side to them that, that they don't realize until, they start really thinking about it. But I think, I think people have a lot of interesting sides to them, and you never know where they're at.
Right. I have to ask you a question. If there is a question that I found myself asking guests a lot this year with books like this, David, it's this. Was it difficult for you to let these characters go? Because you really do take us into not only, of course, where they are presently, but also, of course, what made them who they are and what they're dealing with, and I think readers will find, things about these characters, and that's why I try to highlight a few of these things that I think we all can kind of relate to, right? We all know what it's like for us to sometimes be afraid of a gift, to wonder if we can live up to the responsibility that comes with a gift. I definitely have been there. There are people who have dealt with relationships and been, in situations that have made it difficult for them to trust. I think we all have kind of been there. And then, of course, the idea of doing what's right, doing something bigger than ourselves. I think that is another big one for us. I mean, was it difficult for you after creating this world to step away from it?
Yes, because it was. Yeah, when it comes to an end, I kind of didn't want it to end, which kind of leads to the sequel, The Owl Sings Again, and it kind of picks up and hopefully it continues. But I've had a lot of people comments that came back to me that they can't wait for another one. They want to know what happens next, and so it kind of inspires me to keep writing and kind of do the next one.
Yeah. How does that feel to know that you created something that has made people want more? It's
kind of surprising because you like I said a little bit earlier, you never know if what you're doing if it's a good idea, is it going to bore people, is it you set yourself out there. And I've been pleased that I think the feedback has been good. I think, like I said, it's inspiring actually. So, kind of makes me want to, because I have some other ideas I wanted to do, and I thought, man, 7 years, that was a long time. They always say the first one takes the longest. So,
right.
No, I like it. It inspires me, and I kind of like that world. I've got a few different ways I can go with it, so. Just kind of sorting some things out.
Gotcha. Well, it gives us something to look forward to. I have to let our audience know I'm excited to help spread the word about David's book. It's definitely one that will keep your attention, I will say that. And definitely don't let it intimidate you, because you'll find yourself, what I love about the book too, David, the chapters are short. They're filled with action though, and definitely want you to make you turn to see what's going to happen next, which is why I always always get the print edition of the book because I like being able to carry around when I get a few minutes to be able to turn to where I was and continue. So I definitely want our audience to take advantage of it. Again, David C. Maloney has been our guest. The book is called When the Owl Sings. It's available through our friends at Amazon.com. I'll be posting my review. Definitely encourage you guys to get your own copy of it and to be able to share with your friends what you thought about the book, too. And, David, how can our audience stay connected with you?
I have a website, davidcmaloney.com. I'm active on Facebook, just David Maloney. I have a Facebook page for When the Owl Sings that's tied to it, but it's David Maloney. I'm in Denver, Colorado, or through my webpage, davidcmaloney.com.
All right. Well, David, congratulations to you again, and looking forward to our next conversation together.
Right on. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. If you all came in late, you missed part of the conversation with David. Don't worry. Thanks to our online friends, you all can catch the replay right after we go off the air. The link is already available through our social media site. So head over to facebook.com/CyrusWebb or go to twitter.com/CyrusWebb. If you click on the link there, you can listen to the show completely for free and share it with your friends from there, too. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Make sure you take out time to enjoy some good music as well as a great book. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Let's make it a great one.